Bay Area housing market has been very unpredictable these last 12 months, and it has forced a lot of home buyers to second guess themselves and really think about whether or not now is the right time actually for them to buy. And if you've been consuming my content, you'll know that for the most part, I do believe that right now is actually a fairly decent time to buy a home. And I've gotten a lot of comments and hate and saying, oh, Danny, you're just saying this because you're a salesman and because you only benefit because home buyers, you only make money commission if people buy houses. And while this is true, I only make money when people buy houses, what you don't see is behind the sidelines, or behind the curtains, I should say. When I am one-on-one with a client, there are many instances where I make recommendations that perhaps they should not be buying a home right now. And that's exactly what I want to do in this video. My belief is that if you fall into one of these three categories, you should probably not buy a home right now. So, what are these categories? Stick around, watch the video, and find out. For those of you who are new to the channel, my name is Danny Gould. I'm the CEO of the Selling Silicon Valley Group. Over the last 8 years after graduating from Stanford University, I've sold well over $200 million, encroaching now on $250 million of residential real estate here in the San Francisco Bay Area, helped over 200 families buy and sell homes here in the Bay Area. You can check us out on Google, over 250 5-star reviews. We've got over 100 5-star reviews on Zillow, so plenty of experience working with home buyers here in the area. And I know what to look out for, and I know what categories of home buyers should and shouldn't be buying at any given point in time. And so, generally speaking right now, I do believe that this is a decent time to buy a home. Is it the best time in the history of mankind to buy a home? Not really. But it's also not the worst time either. And if you're curious as to why that is, I would encourage you to go back and watch the last couple of Silicon Valley Snapshot episodes that I filmed. Those go into great detail into the actual market data and why I believe that right now is a good time to be buying a home here in the Bay Area. Despite what the media is trying to tell you, or despite what your friends at work are telling you around the water cooler, there's a lot of reasons to buy right now. But there are a subset of buyers who I interface with on a daily basis that I would not recommend they buy a home. And if you fall into one of these three categories, I would reconsider or reevaluate whether or not buying a home at this juncture is the appropriate move for you. Because again, this is not a one-size-fits-all kind of piece of advice. And by the way, I want to make the disclaimer, I am not a tax consultant, I am not a financial planner, this is not advice, this is simply entertainment. Let's begin. So the first category of buyer is the buyer that is uncertain about their future here in the Bay Area. If you are in a job situation right now where you are not 100% sure that you will remain here over the next 3 to 5 years, then maybe you should reconsider whether or not buying a home is the appropriate move at this juncture in time. Now, 5 years ago, I actually would not have given this advice. When the market was rapidly appreciating, oftentimes buyers could get in, and even if their job transferred them a year later, they could still walk away with some equity in the property. Now, albeit it wasn't a ton of equity, but it was at least enough equity for them to cover all of their sales costs. Now, that is no longer the case. And so what we are currently in right now is a neutral market. We're in a very stable market in the Bay Area right now. Now, there are some areas right now that are still very, very hot. Case in point, one of my team members, Billy, just got a home buyer in a contract the other day. Our buyer, in order to secure the property, had to pay nearly $300,000 over list price. And by the way, the buyer is ecstatic. They love the house, and it was what they needed to do in order to win the house. So there are still pockets out there where it is highly competitive. But all in all, when you look at the market in general, the market is fairly stable. And so, as a result, when you look at a time horizon of 1 to 3 years, it is practically impossible to predict with any degree of certainty what kind of appreciation we're going to experience over the next 1 to 3 years. And because of this fact, I would not recommend someone who is, say, thinking that their job might transfer them out of the Bay Area in the next 1 to 2 years, or they might want to move somewhere else for whatever reason. And if you fit that category and you are not really 100% sure that you will be here for the next 3 to 5 years, then you should probably not buy a house at this juncture in time. Now, this is very specific advice to the San Francisco Bay Area. Why? Well, there are other parts of the country where you can buy a home, and if you had a job transfer and you weren't able to sell the property in a timely manner or cover all of your sales costs, well, you could still rent the home out and cover your mortgage. Unfortunately, right now in the Bay Area, that really isn't the case. There's more often than not, if you're putting a standard, say 10 to 20% down on a property, you are likely not cash flowing green if you are renting it out to someone else. And so this is a very specific piece of advice to the San Francisco Bay Area. If you were, say, in another part of the country, then likely this category of buyer would be very safe in buying a property, and then if their job transfers them out of the area be like at 6 months or 12 months or 18 months, then they'd be perfectly safe renting it out, and they'd cash flow, maybe not a ton of money, but at least enough to cover all of their expenses, plus maybe their property management expenses, etc. Now, there are still plenty of home buyers in that category that will still elect to buy a home here in the Bay, even though their future is uncertain. And I do believe that if you can weather the storm, if you have to leave the Bay Area, rent your property out, and maybe the cash infusion is nominal, but you're bleeding a little bit of money every single month, I still think that the return over a 5 to 10 year time horizon is going to be tremendous. And so if you can weather the storm and say in a 2-3 years, you've left, your property is rented out right now, guess what? You can still refinance that property if and when interest rates come down. And at that point, you're probably cash flowing in the green. And so there's nothing to say that buying a property right now is a bad decision if you are potentially moving out of the area and having to rent the property out, but it's something that you would have to reconsider and reevaluate and really decide whether or not making that investment right now is the right decision for you. Some people will decide it is. Some people will decide it isn't. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. There's only the solution that fits you. All right, so moving on to category number 2. Now, this is for the risk-averse folks out there who are really second-guessing what is going on with the economy right now. And gosh, we're not so certain about our jobs and the future. And oh my goodness, are you watching the news? The sky is falling, all of that good stuff. And really, my advice to anyone, and again, this is not financial advice, I'm not a financial advisor, but the advice that was given to me by a mentor pretty early on in my real estate career that has served me well is to not make any sort of large financial decision until you have 3 to 6 months reserves to cover all of your operating expenses. And so as a home buyer, you should be looking at your reserves, at your account, and saying, hey, after I wire all of my money in and I put all of my money down, do I have enough money in my bank account to cover 3 to 6 months of all of my living expenses, including this new mortgage that I'm assuming? 3 months is a little bit more on the looser end of things, and 6 months is a bit more conservative, but that's really the gauge of the barometer. If you don't have that and you are uncertain about your future, you feel like your job security isn't quite there, if there's instability in your situation right now, then maybe now isn't the best of times to be buying a home. Now, keep in mind, a lot of lenders build this type of reserve requirement into their underwriting models. And so a lot of times you'll know whether or not you have the ability to cover your lifestyle expenses simply because the lender is going to require that you have a base level amount of reserves in your bank account. Now, this isn't universally true. There are plenty of loan products out there where you don't need that. And so if you're kind of sitting there at home and you're trying to figure out whether or not it's the right move for you to make, then a good base level would be like, hey, if we're not feeling 100% sure about our situation in the long term or even in the short term, then if we've got 3 to 6 months reserves, good. If not, maybe we should reevaluate and decide whether or not now is the right time for you to make that move. All right, so moving on to category number 3. Now, this one might be the most controversial and the hardest one to gauge, but it is one that I believe should be talked about. And that is, you maybe shouldn't consider buying a home if you feel you have a better opportunity vehicle to put your money into. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, we live in Silicon Valley. We live in the San Francisco Bay Area where there are a lot of people who are entrepreneurially minded that invest a lot of money into themselves, into their own businesses, and into the success of their future selves. Not necessarily looking at how do I live the most comfortable lifestyle right now, but how do I set myself up for future growth? And if you are in that camp where you are thinking, hey, perhaps there are better opportunity vehicles for me to put my money into, then maybe now isn't the best time for you to buy a home. Let's just talk about a couple of scenarios here where this might apply to you, okay? If you have the option to, say, buy $1 million home, which right now, if you're putting, say, 10% down, you're likely paying somewhere between $6,000 to $7,000 a month for that mortgage. Now, chances are, if you are a single person, or maybe if you are a couple, the two of you, you're buying that property, if there are no kids in the picture, if there are no other family members in the picture that need to live in that property, then $7,000 a month is probably a little bit higher than you'd have to pay if you rented out, like, say, a 1-bedroom apartment. Most 1-bedroom apartments here you could probably find for like $2,500 to $3,500 a month. So if that extra $3,000 to $4,000 a month is going to serve you, if you can find a better opportunity vehicle for it in the short term that is going to further your long-term trajectory if you will, then maybe now is not the worst time for you to reconsider whether or not buying a home is the right move for you at this moment. Now, let's take that same scenario though, but instead of buying a single family, what if that person bought, say, a $500,000 condo, okay? Well, a $500,000 condo at 3.5% down is going to be somewhere like around that $3,500 to maybe $4,000 mark. And so really, at that point, the difference between the money that you're saving on rent versus the mortgage is no longer there. It's practically equal. And your down payment is so, $15,000, $20,000. That combination right there, you've just eliminated all of that downside simply by buying a less expensive property. A lot of times these buyers could have really the best of both worlds, being a homeowner and also having enough money to invest into other opportunity vehicles that could put them into a better place in life if they just downgraded their lifestyle and their expectations for a short period of time. Understanding that this is a stepping stone and not necessarily the last step. And honestly, this is one of the biggest mistakes that I see so many homebuyers making is here in Silicon Valley, here in the Bay Area, when we're home buyers, we are usually, first-time home buyers have usually become accustomed to this luxury high-rise living. And it's really difficult to downgrade your lifestyle from this ultra sexy high-rise living to like 1950s condo living. But if we can realize that this is the stepping stone, that this is the gateway to building equity that allows you to get to that next property and then get to the next property and then so on and so forth. If we can reframe it in that way, it can help us stay more focused on the bigger picture. By the way, all of this is just very generalized advice. And typically what I do when I first meet with a buyer is go over their entire situation to figure out whether or not now is the best time for them to buy. And if so, what areas and what price range and all of that good stuff they should be focused on. So if that's something that you're interested in doing, an exploratory strategy session, you can reach out to me at the number down below, and one of my team members will reach out to you to get something set up on our calendar. And by the way, if you're still watching this video and you're not yet subscribed to the channel, what are you waiting for? Click the subscribe button, hit the notification bell to get notified every single time we post a new video just like this one. This is Danny Gould, everyone. I'm selling Silicon Valley, and I will catch all of you in the next video.